Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Switch Asia webinars on sustainable procurement as a catalyst for innovations and market transformation. My name is Nan. I will be the main moderator of this webinar. Pleasure to meet you. Let me walk you through the housekeeping rules. Your microphone will be muted at all time. And today's webinar is recorded, and the cloud recording will be posted on the Switch Asia website later. And during the sessions, you can type your questions either in the chat or in the Q&A box. At the end of each panel discussion, we will have a more extensive Q&A sessions for you. But if you like to speak, you can press a button to raise your hand. The host will grant you access to address your point. Here is today's program. We will start with an introduction to the webinar by our chairperson, followed by a technical input on sustainable public procurement and its relations to market transformations by our co-chair. Then we will move on to the today's highlights. We have two panel discussions. The former will be on the public procurement policy frameworks for market transformations, and the latter one will be on experiences of market transformations through green public procurement. And we finish the day off with a concluding remarks. Now, let me introduce you about our chair and moderator. They are a team from Switch Asia Policy Support Component. Our chairperson, Sinaida Fadiva, the team leader. Our co-chair, Sanjay Kumar, a senior GPP expert. Moderator of panel discussion 1, Lanchakon Pratumrat, GPP expert. And moderator of panel discussion 2, Elodie Maria Soup, the key expert. Starting with our chairperson, Sinaida. Could you share us how the Switch Asia see the important and mainstream the GPP in the region? Sinaida, please.
Hello, colleagues. Greetings from Policy Support Component of Switch Asia program, and also from the team which is behind very important technical advisory within which this webinar is prepared and engaging with you, which is technical advisory on elevating green public procurement. This topic is not a new for us. It is, in fact, a continuation of rather long engagement. Some of the interventions and the results of this engagement is listed here on the slide. Previously, Switch Asia Policy Support Component has been working in a number of countries, notably in India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Mongolia, Philippines, Thailand. For example, in Thailand, we have been working on development of the green integration policy, national green directory framework, and vendor list registration system, which is really not only focusing on development of the green procurement policies, but also on operationalization of this. Another interesting set of our work has been even earlier in 2021, where the work has been done, for example, in Indonesia, focusing on market assessment for some of the products towards operationalization of green public procurement. In 2022, a report has been published for experiences and status of GPP in Southeast Asian countries, notably Malaysia, Philippines, and Indonesia. And also that has been a work where UNEP has been working as part of the efforts of Switch Asia in supporting GPP through Asia-Pacific Green Public Procurement Network. Next slide, please. Now we are very closely coming to the context, immediate context of today's webinar and the work which is going on for 1 year already, where the intention has been really to elevate green public procurement so it becomes a true catalyst for innovation and market transformation. starting from understanding that theoretically it might have been seen like as such as market transformation and innovation tool for a number of years, but practices can be somewhat lagging behind. So this intervention, this policy support work is really to provide more ambitious push or highlight more ambitious potential for GPP to transform the markets. So now the main focus of this technical advisory is to understand the current standing of the GPP and focus eventually at the potential pilot green public procurement dives where we will focus on the sectors to facilitate and enable stronger sustainable or green procurement practices. This technical advisory is working with Bangladesh, Cambodia, Malaysia, Kazakhstan, Sri Lanka, Timor-Leste, and Vietnam. These countries are involved for a while. Part of them started already more than 1 year ago. A few more recently joined, but catching up with their ambition very rapidly. My co-chair, Sanjay, will take you through details of the argument about strengths of the sustainable public procurement or green public procurement and why and how we can really make it into the instrument for market transformation. Over to you, Sanjay.
Yeah, thank you, Jinad. Can we go to the next slide? Yes, so thank you. Thank you for setting the tone for this webinar. Right. And I understand, when you went to the superstore to buy any stuff last time, many of the times we don't know what is the impact of the products that we are buying. Of course, it has an impact on your pocket, but it also has an impact on society and environment. But we are so fixated on the price that we just look at the quality and price tag and make our buying decision. Right? The government as a bigger consumer, right? They also in a traditional procurement system, they do the same things. They are also fixated on the price, and they do not, most of the time they do not include, impact of products, works, or services they buy on environment, society, and broader economy, right? But as a conscious consumer, when the government wears the hat of a conscious consumer and start taking into account, environmental, social and economic impact of procurement in their decision making, they suddenly become, they transform into a very powerful force, right? Powerful force. And that is why, I say giant, why they are giant? Because if you look at the government all across the world, they roughly procure goods, works, and services worth $13 trillion globally on a per annum basis, right? So this power is there, right? And that is why I say that when they have this power, right, they need to be, shaken up, they need to be woken up, and need to be told and informed that why don't you utilize this purchasing power, great power to transform your market and address some of the challenges, that we'll discuss in the next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah. So you see on the left, you have as a government, you have certain purchasing power. On the right, you have some of the national development goals, which could include SDGs, low carbon economy, inclusive growth, and depending on the priority which the country has. But if the government approaches the market in a traditional way, right, just focusing on the price, please click the button. Then your ability to transform the market is, the first one, your ability to transform the market is very limited, right? But when you start, uh, integrating sustainable public principle into your decision making. That means taking into account environmental, social, and broader economic concern in your purchasing decision. Then your ability to transform the market becomes suddenly gets enhanced, right? And your ability to transform the market is, get increases at least by not 10%, 20%, but I will say that 2x or 3x time, right? So this concept has been there, it's not new concept. And we also have, more than a 2-decade experience of implementing GPP worldwide, right? Next slide, please. But I want to ask you a, very honest question, listen to your heart and then, think about it, what I'm asking. Do you think that government worldwide, they have been able to use this transformation power which the government have to the extent which is desired? I understand that, many of the government in developing country, they don't have GPP policy and program, but even those countries, right, which have well-established GPP program, they are also merely focusing on purchasing whatever greener substitute is available in the market, right? They are not looking beyond, and how to create a bigger impact. So the question for the today webinar is like, how can we shape our GPP policy and program to create, cascading impact on the entire supply chain for achieving the broader development goals? How can we, collaborate with the vendor communities to make deeper transformation, market transformation, so that they are incentivized to, invest in R&D, they are incentivized to develop a products, works or services which consumes less energy, less resources, has minimum impact on the health, and it's easy to dispose of, right? How can we, scale up our GP program, right? So that the private investments start flowing into the sectors, greener sectors, right? Which is good for the, achieving some of your development goals, such as SDGs, low carbon, circular economy, and so on, right? So with these words, I will stop here. We have a panel of speakers, and let us hear them out, right? On, how can we move together and explore the market in a much more fruitful and impactful way. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Sunaida and Sanjay. Now let me bring you to the first panel discussions on public procurement policy frameworks for market transformation. I'm delighted to introduce you our panelists. Tanya Harris. Tanya is a sustainable procurement and supply chains expert at Age Impact. She has over 2 decades procurement experience across private, international development, and public sectors. She leads the development and implementation of ESG into procurement, contract and supplier life cycles. Lynn Turner. Lynn has 20 years experience in the Australian government, mostly in the environmental portfolio. Lynn is currently the Assistant Director in the Circular Economy Division of the Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water, where she is leading on the compliance and reporting against the new environmentally sustainable procurement policies. And next, we have Wuttichai Gelkajang. Wuttichai has more than 30 years of working experiences focusing on national policies and technology development related to environmental and waste management. Wuttichai has held several leadership roles. Currently, he is the Director of the Environmental Qualities and Laboratory Divisions, Pollution Control Department, Thailand. And last but not least, we have Eileen Perez Morales. Eileen is a research associate at the Stockholm Environment Institute headquarters. Her main role involves keeping track of the newest technological developments for CO2 reduction, in heavy industry such as cement and steel industry. This work has linked her to the GPP policy, particularly in the construction and transport sectors. And these sessions will be moderated by Lanchakon Pratumrat. Now over to you, Lanchakon.
Thank you, Dr. Nan. Hello, everyone. Greeting from rainy Bangkok now, and welcome to the panel discussion 1 on the public procurement policy frameworks for market transformation. In this session, we will explore how GPP policies can be redesigned to catalyze innovation, transform markets, and support SMEs in adopting sustainable practices, positioning GPP as a central driver for green growth and market transformation. So now I would like to start with the first question to Khun Vuthichai. How can we redesign current GPP policies to focus on transforming production processes and fostering innovation rather than just purchasing greener products available in the market?
Hello. Thank you for giving me the good question. For this question, I would like to inform you that really we are working with GIZ for a long time about about green procurement. So we do the sustainable consumption and products about how to go on about this kind of thing, like to go for green procurement. Then right now we have some experience and some working that right now we have like a channel that we make how I say like a private sector that joy and interest about green procurement. Specific, we go for government sector first. Like we try to make the list of the procurement that, for example, for PCD, we have like we call green basket. That if you have some condition that you go for green, you can go to this one. And we have a committee that integrate like a green label, like a green hotel, green leaf, or something like that, to join with like the government green procurement list. That this one can be encouraged, like a private sector to go on. Right now, many people interest. On the other hand, today in Thailand, we have like a campaign that SME green procurement. Like we try to encourage small, medium enterprise to concern about this kind of channel that maybe if you go this way, you can go to the green procurement section that you will get maybe some incentive, and we will encourage this enterprise that go on. This is one way. Another, we encourage like we gonna go for the like have a regulation in the future, but right now we have a voluntary program for the government sector for all our country, that you can go for green procurement by using our green procurement list. That this one we have the committee that concern and approve the list. Like this kind of list will approved by our subcommittee under pollution control national board. So this quite impact, and many people like when you want to go for carbon footprint or go for another that they concerned about or green building or something like that, that you want to go this kind of way, you want to go for green procurement also. Right now, it's we make like a, how I say, like we make the market or the system go on, then everyone right now is a majority like that. Normally in our marketing, green procurement for like a procurement normally for government side and private sector side, normally it's almost half. So if you go for government side first and have impact, sometimes for private sector will go on and like use the system of the market. First, I want to say like this. Yep.
Okay, thank you. So, Khun Wuttichai want to highlight about the leadership of the government sector and then try to engage more with the private sector with many channels for them to present their to engage in the green procurement. Thank you, Ka. And I also would like to ask Eileen if you have your view about this question on how can we redesign the current GPP policy to focus on the transforming production process, not only just for normal products in the market.
Yes, let me first verify. Can you hear me okay? Excellent. Thank you so much for the invitation to participate here in this panel. And for that question, I would like to first give some context. Nan mentioned previously, my work has been mainly on heavy industry decarbonization, on steel and cement, and therefore the studies that we have done on green public procurement have been focusing on the construction and the transport sector. So maybe you will see some shades of this on the perspective that I want to provide. So let me touch upon two aspects that I think could support GPP policies to be sources of process transformation and innovation. The first one is the interdependence of green public procurement with other policies. They are not standalone. And the second one is the sector-specific needs for targets and time-bound roadmaps for the transitions of both heavy industries or sectors that are utilizing materials with high embodied carbon, such as construction and transportation. So coming back to the first point about interdependence, green public procurement shouldn't be a standalone instrument because some of the learnings that we gather during our studies shows that in different geographies, being it Europe or other selected G20 members, countries that we studied, what GPP was looking like in their own context, showed an interdependence between green public procurement commitments, but also other climate policies. So this is, for example, carbon pricing, eco-labeling, or green product standards. So green public procurement shouldn't be understood as just one package, but that will also help. That broader interpretation will help to have more support on the transformation and innovation of it. Therefore, a thoughtful coordination on how these policies interact and can leverage green public procurement commitments could support transformation of heavy industries, for example, and can support having the business case development for new technologies, for deploying technologies that could help to produce low carbon products that will be then used for the construction of a building or of a new railroad and so on. And on the second point, for the redesign of green public procurement policies, and with this I would like to close my intervention, our research showed that there is a relevance on having some sectoral guidance because procurement and green public procurement can contribute to national decarbonization targets only if action plans are designed to address the specific local on the municipality level, but also the country level needs. So beyond just having good intentions of including green criteria for procurement, a roadmap for implementing green public procurement, such as, for example, what in Europe it's called the national action plans, can help to set a timeline and measurable targets for each sector to accomplish. So with this, I would like to close my intervention.
Thank you, Eileen, for your insight. And let's move to the second question, which I would like to ask all the panelists. Which is one specific change or policy framework would you recommend making GPP a proactive driver of deep market transformation and sustainable innovation? So let me start with Lynn. You mute?
We
Oh,
need
no,
to
okay.
unmute you.
Classic mistake. So from my recent policy experience, my advice is to get started, start somewhere, and to build over time. So on the 1st of July this year, we introduced our mandatory sustainable procurement policy. And previously we had sustainable procurement in our procurement framework. And it said that environmental sustainability should be considered, and we had a link to the Sustainable Procurement Guide. But we had no way of knowing, and it relates to Eileen's last question about setting targets and how do you kind of then measure them. We had no way of measuring, so we had no way of knowing who was doing what. So when we started researching, we in our policy development stage, and we were talking to domestically and internationally, the advice we got was just make a start. So, and when you look, and the introduction to Sanjay talked about the power of, our public procurement. Australia's green government procurement is about 17% of our GDP. So it's a big market lever. And so the policy signals that the government wants to do business with organisations who are undertaking actions to reduce their environmental footprint in their own business, but also that we want to do business with businesses who are, selling goods and products, who could supply us with goods and products that are going to have an environmental impact. So this government procurement signals, and this is what Sanjay was talking about, that signals to the market the government's sort of intention. It gives them confidence to invest in the transition. And we've heard this in our consultation. So Australia's green public procurement policy focuses, and like our first speaker, focuses on some categories. So we looked at 4 high impact categories, and that's where we're just getting started. So we chose these categories because of the significant government spend in these categories. We looked at international experience, certification exists to avoid greenwashing, and where there was market readiness. So we did some, research, and it showed that these categories were the most likely to have a material impact on environmental outcomes at a lower cost. So we've not set targets. We're focusing on collecting data and establishing a baseline, and hopefully then at the 5-year mark when we review our policy, we'll be able to set targets because we'll have a baseline, and we'll also be able to then look at whether we need to change our spending thresholds for where the policy starts, or whether we should add more categories. So we're starting somewhere and we're building over time. So it's also a time to consider, I've talked about that. And consultation. I think that really consultation is a really important part, and it really guided a lot of decisions that we made. For example, we found that big business were very ready to participate. but it was more patchy for small to medium businesses, as our first speaker talked about. So we've designed the policy to be flexible. So you don't have to apply all the principles. We've got 14 principles in ours. It's a principle-based policy across climate, environment, and circularity. So the policy is flexible. You can just apply some of them. So it means that it's more, can cater to businesses who aren't so ready, but they can participate in some way and hopefully build confidence and invest in the change. So we've also had a lot of feedback in our consultation about you need to provide support. It's a big change, and you have to provide communication, outreach, provide templates and guidance to make it easy for people to comply. So this is a big part of our package, and we have a help desk. So we're doing a lot of talking about the policy and helping people make a start, both the government and we're doing some work with suppliers. So I'll stop there. I think that was pretty fulsome. Thank you.
Okay, very good start of the GPP system in Australia. Thank you. And how about Tanya? What would you like to share on this?
Thank you. I would like to say that the policy that Lynn just talked about, one of the best things from the other side as a supplier or in the market is the very clear market signals it sends to industry, which then helps actually increase the action of change and transformation. It's a fantastic policy, and the Commonwealth should be commended for that. And I think, talking to what each of the previous speakers have talked to, policy, having really clear sustainability targets that are connected across ES and G, so not just environment, and they may be standalone policies, but from a sustainable procurement perspective, they're actually connected. And how does the procurer connect each of those individual policies? But having binding targets, and we've seen that across Australia, from the Commonwealth down to the state and also down to local government level, there are clear and binding targets. For example, every state and territory in Australia has set to achieve net zero by 2050. As a result of those binding targets, all public procurement agencies must be able to demonstrate that they are taking reasonable steps to be able to achieve those targets. They're aligned with international targets. So therefore, Australian industry is encouraged not just to be able to get additional revenue by public procurement opportunities, but also to ensure that they're competing in the green economy globally. And from a manufacturing and industry perspective, that's really important as an incentive. And then going from those kind of quite high level binding targets at the state level is what we've already heard about, which is really practical. So taking that to a category. So if you're a procurer, looking at your category of spend, or if you're a government policy agency, looking at industry specific targets. So doing that in collaboration with industry. So the market readiness that Lynn talked about was through consultation to understand where those initiatives could be implemented rapidly. And then translating that into public procurement specific category specific targets. So looking at quantifiable year-on-year reduction, what those certifications might be introduced at a mandatory level, and then being able to measure and monitor that through contracts. And so we've seen procurement frameworks that are either at a whole of government level, or if they're at a specific agency and category. They do specify minimum requirements. And we've seen that across quite a few different categories. I know there's a question in the Q&A. So where we're seeing it most commonly is, as Lynn was talking about, the high impact. So it's either high spend or has a high sustainability intensity, and that could be emissions, which climate change and circularity are closely related. But from an interconnected policy perspective, buy local. So we're looking at how we can have economic development opportunities under the buy local policy that we're seeing at either Commonwealth or state level. And then that is translating into decarbonisation initiatives, because if you're, obviously logistics and embodied carbon, if you're buying local, you have the benefit there. So building and construction, transport and infrastructure, utilities, so whether that's energy and opportunities there, motor vehicle and fleet, and also ICT. So that kind of the 6 key categories that we're seeing across Australian public procurement. And translating that then from a category specific minimum standards is then how does procurement apply mandatory criteria to ensure that they're reflecting those advancements and being able to quantify. And then we can go into things as detailed as life cycle costing analysis, environmental product declarations, circular economy outcomes, and product carbon footprints.
Thank you, Tanya. Yeah, good example from Australia with the clear signal that encourage the participation of the supplier side as well in the supplier, as what I heard is very important. And how about Eileen? You have any short insight regarding this?
Yes, I definitely agree with what the last intervention said about data and about reporting. Mandatory policies are quite needed. So I would like to motivate 2 things. The first one is really having accurate and harmonized, transparent data, not only at national, local level, but also if we want green public procurement to work at an international level, this type of harmonized data should be out there so that procurers, independent of the context or the location, can take decisions based on this, and probably for this collaboration across borders is required. And in addition to this, I would like to close by saying to create a deep transformation, we should also think about not only the frameworks, but also about the human beings that are behind the procurement processes, who, as was stated in the first keynote presentation, are currently making procurement decisions, probably based on the best value for the money. But now these individuals need to be motivated. So procurers need to have a clear mandate, goals, an adequate knowledge and resources. Again, talking about knowledge and how to evaluate green public procurement criteria. In the end, the success of the implementation of green public procurement will be on the hands of those preparing the documentation, yes, but also those that are well motivated to select the winning bid, and that's relevant, and that should be also part of the participatory process, not only creating a big burden for procurers, but also supporting how they can be engaged to be knowledgeable and to be the ones like making the decision of which bid should be favored due to their green public procurement considerations.
Thank you. Maybe 1 minute for Kun Wuti-Chai, what would be the specific policy change or framework would you recommend for GPP?
Yeah, it's okay. I think on the other hand, I forgot to tell you guys that for Thailand, we have the policy that BCG model, like a bio, green, and circular. So this is very dry our market and our country to go on. like right now we have another link like for industrial sector that like they have a green industry. So right now like they want to join like to apply and comply with us to go on for government green procurement. So I think in the future it's gonna die the market and die our way to go for green public procurement. I think should we go that way in the future. That I think I want to say like that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ka. Next question will be, how can the government and procurement agencies use GPP to incentivize industries to invest in the development of innovative, sustainable products and service that go beyond existing market offering? Ka, may I ask Lynn to answer again?
Yes, thank you. My experience is from my consultation, because we've just started our green public procurement, but we have been working in in sustainable procurement before we introduced the policy. And as I said, it was patchy, but we've heard from industry that they see this green public procurement as demonstrating a strong commitment to the government procurement of sustainable materials, and they consider it as a major drive for innovation, providing industry with incentives for investing in developing more sustainable products and services. So really strong market signal for them. So the theory is that successful delivery of alternative materials in public procurement will normalise the procurement of these goods and services in the wider economy, and that will result in a shift to a more sustainable production model. So that's the theory that we've based our policy on. So there is an indication that, you know, some of the industries are already developing these sustainable solutions, but they just don't offer them to government because we haven't been asking for them. So, however, we did hear that some of these goods and services may be more expensive, and if the government doesn't put them into their approaches to the market, then they're, as I said, less likely to offer them. So if government asks for them, must be prepared to pay more, because industry says that initially they'll be more expensive. So under the green public procurement policy, we ask suppliers to respond to the approach to market using a template, and we ask them about their actions in their own organisation to reduce their environmental impact. We ask them to address 14 of the climate, environment and circularity principles, and what innovations they will employ and how they will deliver them. So, and the innovations can be in design, products, materials, or processes. So we publish case studies of successful innovations to help procurers and suppliers understand what innovation is and what's possible. And I'll share a case study. Our Department of Defence required 32,000 new waste collection bins across its facilities, and they undertook some market research which determined there were no multi-sort bins on the market meeting their criteria. So the multi-sort bins are red for waste, yellow for recycling, green for organics. So they saw an opportunity for innovation, and they worked with partners to create a desired product. The end result allowed Defence to procure bins that were made from locally Australian recyclate. The new products came in at a really good price point compared to non-environmentally sustainable products. Really what it hinged on was the size of the procurement gave Defence's partners the confidence to invest. So it's a Melbourne company purchased this machinery and the other necessary assets to manufacture the bins. And in another additional example of circularity, the machinery was recycled from previous use in the automotive industry, which has now closed down. So that was a lovely story. So Innovation by defence allowed the company to invest in a environmentally sustainable product where there was previously none available. So we saw a market change. So this demand is certainly a key benefit of green public procurement, and it can empower industry investment in innovation by reducing risk. So that's my example. Thanks.
Thank you, Lynn. And move to Tanya. Can you briefly give some insight about this?
Absolutely. I think in Australia, the building and construction and property sector is perhaps the most advanced when it comes to taking initiative as a result of sustainable public procurement policy. And so we've seen, as a result of government aiming for more sustainable buildings, building products, construction materials, and design, a national initiative called the Green Star program under the Green Building Council of Australia. What that has done is it has established sustainable materials as a requirement, but it's also seen some of our private sector industry players collaborating together to actually develop new materials that, for example, we've got now a lower carbon concrete that's available that takes recycled industrial waste products like fly ash and slag directly as a result of having industry standards implemented. We've seen energy efficiency and net zero buildings become the norm as a result of sustainable public procurement and a nationwide standard implementation. And we've seen examples of some of our now flagship buildings in different states reflecting a 6-star rating or more. And we've also seen circular economy in construction become the norm. So most construction sites will have zero waste as a result of these standards.
Very nice. And to the last question on how can GPP be structured or reformed to create opportunity for SMEs to innovate, compete, and thrive in emerging green market. Thea?
Okay, so this is one of my, and this is where we've been talking a lot about environment. So what we're seeing and what we've seen as a result in Australia of 2% of Commonwealth public procurement spend must be spent on First Nation or Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander businesses here in Australia. So as a result of mandating a percentage of spend of all public procurement spend, what we've seen is our First Nation businesses actually grow to the point where there is not enough supply to meet the demand. And so we've seen, and First Nation businesses very rarely large organisations, so they're small, medium enterprise. The result of the policy and regulatory support means that there has been a industry body set up to allow verification of ownership and meeting certain standards, making it easier for procurers to be able to find First Nation businesses. It's provided incentives through grants for training and capacity building of Indigenous businesses. And there's also the public and private collaboration where we're seeing some of the banking industry working together to provide sustainability-linked loans and favourable rates available for small, medium enterprise and Indigenous-owned businesses to be able to meet scalability requirements and increase supply in our market. I think it's an amazing story.
Yes, and I think maybe want to invite one of our panelists from panel 2, Ruben Van Galen, to share about this his insight on this question.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone from the Netherlands. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to be part of this lovely webinar today. Here in the Netherlands, we have been dealing with this for quite some time already, and justly so, because 1/3 of the Netherlands is below sea level, so we have to act, and we have to be the front runner here and show the world how we could incorporate better GPP strategies. And so basically how we have created a system where in GBP we are willing to pay extra for a more sustainable way of producing or creating a project for contractors. But as Tanya was also saying earlier, one of the most important things here is to quantify the environmental impact so that you know right now where you're at, that you can set targets for where you want to go, and then create a strategy on how to get there. So first you need to understand where are we right now, and for that to do, for you to be able to do that, we have to in LCA we quantify these environmental impacts looking at 19 different impact categories. So, and how we do it in the Netherlands, they value each and every impact category in a certain way, and they weight that to an environmental cost indicator. It's a single point score that basically shows the environmental impact of your product or in your project for a submission on a contract, what your environmental impact would be. So that gives the governmental agencies another tool to decide their decision making. What it actually does is they give an additional discount for one project that has a lower impact on the environment, making it able for the contractor to subscribe or submit a higher price for their projected project, but still be able to win the tender. And what it does is that contractors are willing to look for more sustainable products, suppliers of these products, and are willing to pay extra dollar because on below the line, eventually they will be able to receive a higher discount than the extra price of that more sustainable product is, which then in turn makes the producer of these products inclined to invest in their ways of producing and become more greener in their production ways, because they understand that if I have a lower impact on the environment and I can show that in my environmental profile with the environmental cost indicator, then I am able to increase my price. And in the end, of course, it's all about money with a lot of companies. It would be nice if we could expect them all to be intrinsically motivated to reduce their environmental impact, but that's just not the real world right now.
All right. Thank you. And I see many questions here as well. So let me try one question to Lynn, asking about can you specify 4 categories that you choose? So, or
Oh, yes. So
Yeah.
it's interesting that just through the conversation, I can see there's a lot of overlaps with other speakers here today. So we chose construction services. So that's buildings and also infrastructure like car parks, roads. ICT goods, furniture, fittings and equipment, and textiles. So we're starting with 4 categories, and we have spending thresholds. Construction services at 7.5 million, and for the other 3 categories it's 1 million. So anything at or above that.
Sweet. So, and if it's possible, could you please share the link to more information about that
Okay.
in our chat, maybe, so everyone can see.
Thank you.
Yeah. And other question to Lynn also, how did the Ministry of Defense work with one supplier? What about competition with other suppliers? Was it legal to work with only one supplier?
Good question. So they went out to the market and they they didn't get anyone that could fulfill their approach to the market brief. So they wanted to use recycled content, and no one could. So that was an opportunity for them to then ask, work with someone to, innovate. So I suppose if the market couldn't come up with something, they were able to go out and work with someone. Yes.
All right. Okay, and also another question to Lynn. Stay with me. Would love to get to know the 14 principles too, if you may. So the 14th principle, can you also
They're
share
in the policy? Yeah. And they sit under 3 focus areas. We look at climate, environment, and circularity. So circularity is, reuse, refurbish, those sort of things. But it's in the policy. I'll put the link in there.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
And can I interrupt a little bit? I think there is another question, but it's already moved to another box. It said that can procurement be blended with the green finance? So I don't know who should accommodate this. Tanya, Eileen, or Wutichai, if you wish to accommodate this. Do you think procurement can be blended with the green finance?
I can't answer that.
Tanya, I saw your not face.
Yes.
You can say something in short. Thank you.
Absolutely. Green financing and public procurement are very closely linked. I mean, we saw that with the ISO 2400 and then the sustainable finance ISO standards that are under development or just being published now. When it comes to public procurement policy, we're seeing some of the state-based investment corporations embedding sustainability minimum standards as a part of their investment criteria. So there is sustainability finance or sustainable financing linked there. And then on the flip side, it's more around those market mechanisms, incentivization through favorable interest rates, etc., for industry that are adopting it. So they're the things I've been exposed to.
Okay. Yes. Thank you very much for sharing. And Dr. Ann, I think the time is up for your session. So once again, I would like just to thank you all of the 4 panelists and also the moderators, Dr. Lanchakon. So thank you very much. And now shall we move to the next panel discussions on experiences of market transformations through the GPP. And it is my pleasure to introduce you 3 panelists. First, Benjamin Wee. Benjamin is a sustainable procurement pledge expert at Singapore branch. He has an extensive background in global supply chain and sustainable procurement across diverse industry. And currently, he is serving as a co-founder and a chief sustainability officer of the climate tech startup called PlanetWise. The next one, Malik Atan. Malik is the Green Government Procurement Technical Specialist with more than 25 years of experience working for Malaysian Green Technology and Climate Change Corporations in many projects related to sustainable production and consumptions, government green procurement, National Green Recognition Scheme for certified products and services or MAHIJAU, and also many more projects. And last but not least, you have already seen him, Ruben van Galen. Ruben is the LCA Division Manager at Eco Review, a Netherlands-based company specializing in life cycle assessment for building and chemical products. Eco Review's work involves quantifying environmental impacts, providing critical data that governmental agencies use to make informed decisions on tender projects, beyond just considering price. And these sessions will be moderated by Elodie Maria Sub. Now over to you, Elodie.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nan. And gentlemen, thank you for being here with us. Good morning, good afternoon to you and to all our attendees who are many today. 30 people are listening to us. And I'm happy to have you all here. I will dive into the topic and start with you, Mr. Malikatan, to tell us a little bit more about the experience of Malaysia and what are the examples that led to really a market transformation in Malaysia to more sustainable practices through GPP in Malaysia. Thank you, Malik.
Good morning, good afternoon, Malik from Malaysia. So thanks for the moderator. So actually, I would like to share about GPP in Malaysia. So before the government introduced GPP in Malaysia, so we have what call it the special program. So we call it as a My Hijau program. In English, we can say that we introduced a Green Malaysia program. So actually in the My Hijau program or Green Malaysia program, so we have two areas that we would like to focus. So number one, we focus on what call it the sustainable consumption. So how we introduce the sustainable consumption. So we have the program. So number one, we have the green procurement program. So how we create the market, how we create the demand in Malaysia. So we introduce green procurement. So at the moment, we have the big program so related to the government sector. So we have government green procurement or GPP, green public procurement. So this GPP already started in 2013. So how we introduce this program to the government sector? So we start with the federal government. So from 2013 until 2017, so we already implement all the federal government. So we have 26 ministries. And now we would like to expand the GPP to the national level. So starting last year, so we promote and we train all the state government, including the local authorities, how to implement the GPP in their premises. And the second area that I would like to share with this, we'll call it this forum. So we have the sustainable production. So before this, number one is about sustainable production. So consumption, and now I would like to share about the green sustainable production. So how we create the supply for green product. So we have a lot of what call it activities. So number one, we have the My Hijau Mark. So actually, My Hijau Mark as known as what call it green label in Malaysia. So actually, My Hijau Mark is a recognition scheme for certified green product and services, not only for local, but we can recognize from overseas as long they comply with our requirement. So for example, like if the product already have certified with the, for example, like EU level or Blue Angel, so they can register and recognize in our My Hijau Mark. So then we have the My Hijau Directory. So how we educate the consumer to search the green product by using the green directory. So we have the My Hijau directory. And the last one, how we encourage for the local product. So we have Green Industry and SME Development Program. So actually for this program, we have the two objectives. Number one, how this program can increase the number of local products. And also number two, how we can encourage all the local company to implement green practices. So not only their product are green, but their premises and operation should be green. So for this, we'll call it program for green industry and SME development program. So at the moment, we have the two incentives from the government. So number one, we have the green technology tax incentive. So either green investment tax allowance or green income tax exemption. And number two, our government introduced a green technology financing scheme. So if any company doesn't have enough money to implement the green project, so we have the GTFS. So this GTFS, the government will subsidize 2% on to the all applicant, and also the government can be a guarantor about 60% for this we call it financing scheme. I think that's that I would like to share at the, to all the participants.
Thank you so much, Mr. Malik. And I like how you gave us, similarly to Australia, the federal view and the decentralized view, and also how it's both a question of communication, but also of key public finance tools of incentives for companies to go green. Thank you for that. And now I'd like to ask the next question to Ruben, not only to tell us about the examples in the Netherlands where market transformation was a success through GPP, but also to tell us about the challenges that hinder the use of GPP for market transformation. And if I can, I'd like to link that question also to a comment in the Q&A, which was about trust and how you build that trust between the procurement official and the so-called green product. So how can we trust that it is green? And I'm sure you have some ideas about that. Thank you, Ruben.
That's a very great comment, great question, and very necessary for building a trustworthy system. But let me first answer the first question, because I think I have three concrete examples on how this green public procurement is working in the Netherlands and how this led to successful reduction in climate impacts. For example, in the asphalt sector, that's really where the Netherlands has started, let's say 12, 13 years with incorporating environmental impact, quantified environmental impact in their decision making, and especially for road infrastructure. So they have been given this discounts, as I mentioned earlier, on submitters of tenders that can quantify, show that they have a low impact on environment. So what would government do? They would make a reference calculation at first and then say, here, market, if you can calculate an impact on environment that is 70% lower than this reference calculation, you can start getting a discount, and as low as you can get, the higher your discount will become. So what happened is that in the asphalt sector, a lot of innovations came around using, for example, green gas in their production methods for producing asphalts. And then, for example, in installing this asphalt on the roads, they have been looking for ways to become more greener in their production ways. And one of them was, for example, that electrifying their machinery. And that now we see that a lot of companies are thriving in the Netherlands that are transforming original diesel fueled machinery into electrical equipment, because that investment is legitimate, because they can file in and sign up for this the tender with a higher price because they're using more sustainable ways of producing it. Also, for example, in the cement industry in the Netherlands, we don't have any cement manufacturers. So all cement that is being delivered here in the Netherlands comes from German factories, which are about 200 kilometers across the border. But because of this green public procurement strategy in the Netherlands, these German cement manufacturers have been creating a different kind of cement with a higher content of secondary material, blast furnace slag, which is a secondary product, a waste stream, originally seen as a waste stream from the steel production, but has properties that is good for cement manufacturing. So Germany has been creating this cement specifically for the Dutch market, which has a way lower impact on environment. Now, the Netherlands really became a front runner in that sense, because Germany is now also understanding, hey, we might have a lot of resources, which is called a clinker, which is the base material for the binding material that makes concrete. They never really went that far as to think, hey, we should also look into different opportunities. But now, because there's such a big demand from the Netherlands, Germany also starts to understand, hey, we can be much better, and also maybe should use these more sustainable types of cements that we are actually producing here anyway in Germany already. Lastly, my third example would be the grid operator here is also in Germany. It's called TenneT. They build very large windmill farms. So for all this wind energy to be transformed onto land, they need to build a huge transformer platform, which used to be oil winning platforms kind of companies now are building platforms where big transformers are equipped. And you can imagine that these are huge buildings that not only the outside is a huge impact on environment with leaching to the ocean of the steel and these kind of things, but also the internal part of the transformers actually we found out has a very substantial impact on the environment. So what TenneT is requiring for all contractors, that all of their suppliers of steel have an EPD of their product. So there are submitters in this tender that are from Gulf region or even further east that have their production in Malaysia or in China, and they resource their steel from South Korea, Japan, and China. So what the Netherlands is doing with their green public procurement has a trickle-down effect in the whole supply chain, making steel manufacturers in China quantifying their environmental impact and creating an environmental profile. So what this small little country in the Netherlands is actually performing with this strategy on GBP is very immense. And then what if I can go on into the second question? What is then very, very important is indeed that it is a trustworthy system, so that we know that if an EPD or an LCA study is completed in Asia, is in line with how we would perform an LCA study in Europe, so that we know that if that study over there is verified and they have that environmental product declaration, an environmental product declaration in EPD is basically just a document that shows no confidential information, but all the essential information along with the environmental profile to hand on to the following LCA practitioner to make, for example, this project calculation of this whole complete offshore platform. It is essential that a steel manufacturer in Europe, which has had the best intentions of putting forward this LCA study, knows that also in China or South Korea or Japan, the steel manufacturer has performed the LCA study in a similar way. So harmonization, transparency, all are extremely important in this case. So also in the Netherlands, we see in Europe, we see actually that there's two different kind of databases that are used for making LCA calculations. You have the EcoInvent database, which is a Swiss-oriented database, and you have the Gabi database, which is German, and both give a different kind of outcome if you have the exact same input in your calculation. So that's one of the main concerns I have, is creating this harmonization so that we create this trustworthy system, and then following that is the verification of these, first of all, product LCAs, the EPDs, if that should all be done in a similar fashion, which there are norms, worldwide norms, the ISO norms. But then in Europe, we have the EN norm 15804, and then we have actually additional norms for example, product category rules for cement, as I mentioned earlier, or asphalt. We have specific rules that create this level playing field among all producers of this product. And then lastly, it is very important to have an as-built verification, so that, for example, in this tender registration, you promise as a contractor, I will perform this project, for example, building a bridge using these very sustainable products. Then when you hand over and you finalize your project, the bridge is built, then a verification needs to be done to see if you are compliant with what you have registered in the beginning, and if that discount that you have received is still applicable. And if not, a heavy fine will be put upon this contractor.
Thank you very much, Ruben. And actually, there's a lot more questions waiting for you in the chat. And because we're a bit short on time, I might invite you to have a look at them now. And I'll ask a question to Benjamin, just to leave him a little bit of time to speak. And but if there's time, I'll come back to you, Ruben, so you can answer directly. But first, Benjamin, we wanted to ask you, especially given your role in Singapore as part of the Sustainable Procurement Pledge, we wanted to ask you about partnerships between the private and the public sector, and what role these play in really accelerating transformation through GPP. So.
Yeah, thank you, Elodie, for the question. I'm glad to be here on Switch Asia event. Right, so on partnership, I think is a very important part of the UN SDG, right? Partnership for goals. And if you were to look at most of the private sectors right now, they kind of focus on their own individual contributions, right, to the various UN SDG impact. I think the greatest impact between the private sector and public sector is really lies on the goal number 17, right, which is on the partnership for goals. And how then private sector and public sector can work together, especially from from the public government procurement point of view, right? So, example I can share with you here in Singapore. Okay, I'm not from public sector, but I do participate in a lot of discussions and sustainable procurement movement through this sustainable procurement pledge in Singapore. So what happened right now is the government is driving this green plan, quite similar to what Malik shared in Malaysia. So we do have this green plan that is also aligned to the UN SDG 2030 goals, and as well as our commitment to Paris Agreement. Right, so the government is committed, right, to have the peak emissions earlier and then reduce our emissions thereafter. And hopefully we can reduce our emissions and meet our target by 2030. So how do we collaborate, right? So the government kind of, from the previous experience that I see, which is pretty successful in Singapore, is the government kind of engaged the market, the industries. Like, for example, on the waste management, Singapore being a tiny island, we have challenges in dealing with our waste, right? Our waste management. So we have a very aggressive goal of recycling 70% of our waste. So in order to achieve that, which is through the circular economy concept, where we have to recycle our waste as much as possible and use more of the recycled materials, and in both the technical cycle and the biological cycle, right? So we have government support to the industries to encourage them to process their food waste. So there are funding on investment of technology to allow the process of food waste in Singapore, and that kind of helps the businesses, right, to translate towards the zero waste goals of government. And on the other hand, okay, before they start to introduce regulations, okay, they will have a period of support through funding. I think that's a very prominent and probably quite unique in Singapore, that the government is supporting the industry in their transition towards sustainability. On green procurement space, okay, the government in the recent years, as part of the green plan, has also introduced various initiatives. One of the initiative is they are saying that all public procurement will only buy energy efficient appliances and also low emissions vehicles. Right, that will kind of drive the demand. As you know, government is the biggest spender, right, compared to private sector as a single entity, right? So that kind of message, right, will definitely drive the industries towards decarbonization, introduction of electric vehicles. Of course, our government also have installation of the infrastructure to allow to facilitate the growth of the electric vehicles. And on the other space, which is on what Ruben was talking about on cement, right? Our Building Construction Authority over here in Singapore has been looking at or having this green mark accreditation of building, and they are also pushing for green materials, right? So how are you able to produce cement or even steel in the with a lowest carbon emission as possible? Okay, so the government is looking at building materials as well, right? So there's another category. And on top of that, the public procurement, the green public procurement has also committed to allocate in their tender 5% for sustainability criteria, right? So typically in a government procurement tender, they will focus on the commercial aspect versus the quality. And with the introduction of the green public procurement, they are now looking at 5% allocation of the total criteria to sustainability. That will shape the industry towards the importance of sustainability, right? Especially in construction as well as infocom technology. So these are the two categories in Singapore that has the largest spend from government perspective. So I think with this, it is definitely shaping the private sectors, and through that partnership, okay, and a very clear direction of the government policy, that will help drive the transformation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. I see it's really a web of initiatives. It's not just one policy, one incentive. It's many things coming together that make it really work, this partnership between public and private. Thank you.
The whole ecosystem has to work together.
The whole ecosystem. If you have more details that you'd like to share with the audience in the chat, don't hesitate. A key website or something that can inspire people, don't hesitate.
Sure.
And so as promised, I will come back to you, Ruben, because there are a few very direct questions, clarifications, if I may say. Someone is asking you, the discount for a green supplier actually means that the government was willing to pay more. So I think that's an important message in our maybe more Asian audience. Is the government of Netherlands willing to pay more for green procurement?
Yeah, it's quite easy actually if you look at it in the way of being below sea level. If we don't act now, if we don't put in the efforts, we will have a lot more investments to make to increase the heights of our dikes, to prepare ourselves for incoming storms and all kinds of trouble that will come our way if we keep going in this manner. So to use that, to know this, we could better already invest now in greener ways of producing in building infrastructure and buildings than having it all destroyed when a big storm will come our way. I don't. Should I go on with question number 4, Elodie? Is that what?
Yes, and the very last question, and then we'll conclude the webinar, and we'll pass the floor to our moderator, Dr. Nan. If you could tell us about what monitoring and evaluation has been put in place in the Netherlands to track and measure the transformation that is happening.
Let me first give a little bit of context regarding Europe, because as we have in 2015, we have the Paris Agreement, right? Where we set the sustainability development goals for 2030 and 2050, being net zero carbon in 2050. This policy that we have created needs to trickle down, as Tanya and Lynn and Eileen were mentioning earlier as well, down to the national level, down to provinces and local municipalities. They need to create their sustainability goals and then find the strategy to reach those goals. That strategy needs to be transferred into projects where you have set targets during that project and you want to see them being reached. But how do you monitor if your projects are actually contributing to the strategy and contributing to the long-term goals that we have set for your local municipality? Because you need to report your reductions in CO2 to your provinces, to your national level, so that they can do their reporting towards the European Union. So it's very important to monitor and help. So one of our spin-off companies, EcoMonitor, is helping the local governments in, on the forehand, creating a tender guidelines, making this reference calculation, making it easier for contractors to submit their project planning and their total impact environment for their complete project, and then giving the governmental agencies like a local government very quickly view on who is the winner of this tender because of the set parameters on front. And then afterwards, when the project is being developed, you want to see if this, so as I mentioned earlier, if the delivered project is in line with what you promised during submission. So all that needs to be in line, and that's a service that one of our partner companies has developed. For in terms of setting these goals as a private company, there are in Europe 50,000 companies will have to comply with the CSRD reporting, Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. There are the ESG topics are mentioned in there, so environment, social, governance, and in order to this will be a reporting that will be publicly available. It will be published in a central database where everybody, investors, employees, journalists, can look into your strategy on how to reach goals that you have defined now based on your quantified data. And every year you need to show that you are working towards the goal that you have set yourself. And you can be held accountable by these journalists that will say to you, hey, 2-3 years ago, you promised me to deliver these things and work towards that goal, but now I don't see any improvements here. This can lead to investors don't want to invest in your company anymore. Employees don't want to work for you. So CSRD is a very, very big topic in Europe. And one of the biggest things is that we have to step away from the subjective targets, the greenwashing, as Lynn was mentioning earlier. We need to go to actual objective quantified data. And there, that's also what you can then use for your CSRD reporting. You can really say, look at my environmental profile for this product now, look at my environmental footprint of my complete factory, of my complete company, and this is where I want to reduce my impacts, and this is how I will do this for the coming 5 years. I think that's the two key aspects here, is monitoring and reporting and making it transparent for the whole world to see.
Thank you very much, Ruben. And I see how we've gone full circle. We've gone back to the cross-cutting policies that Eileen and Lynn were mentioning, how the CSRD, the reporting directive of the EU, is actually also contributing to GPP in yet another way. So thank you very much for that. And on this, I'd like to conclude this panel on the experiences on market transformation through GPP and pass the floor to Dr. Nan. Thank you.
Yes. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, the panelists, and also Elodie for the second panel discussions. So I think today we learned a lot, but the time is quite short. And thank you, Lynn, for sharing the link about Australian procurement policies. And also thank you, Benjamin, that you also share the Singapore Green Plan. So the audience, you can check in the chat box, so you can see the link where you can just continue browsing by yourself later. So I think he has come to the end of today's webinar, and the concluding remarks will be presented by our chairperson, Sinaida. Over to you, Sinaida.
Thank you very much, colleagues, for excellent exchange. So I guess the question of today has been to provide or strengthen the argument to what extent green public procurement facilitates future market development. And the resound conclusion of it is indeed it does, by introducing criteria where we could see the trend towards making those criteria eventually compulsory, having also, as was mentioned before, the baseline to start with, but also interestingly differentiating, this criteria becomes differentiating by doing so, accommodating transformation for different sectors, providing different pathways for maturing the industries and service providers to enter into more sustainable market. GPP also clearly, our colleagues demonstrated, facilitate market by creating consistent and also accelerating demand for sustainable products and services through roadmaps. And also it intensifies innovations, encourages investment in green technologies and green product. And also we could see how GPP can even prioritize products which are currently being sold above market prices through discounts in the GPP processes. GPP shapes industries clearly, we could see that, towards environmentally friendly practices, normalizing these practices most effectively through also engagement with the private sector in the process. And also GPP sets standards that push market to adapt to sustainable requirements, fostering long-term growth in the different sectors. Infrastructure and utilities have been mentioned as big tickets in there, ICT, construction materials, notably cement, equipment, transport, our colleagues have been mentioning. And as we can see, it can trigger innovation practices even across the supply chain with structures through different countries and continents. Important point has been there, and it must be, of course, highlighted on the point of verification of claims through transparency, comparability of different GPP claims, going beyond traditional labels towards environmental product declarations. And certainly, especially it has been coming through the questions, and it is important and probably really assignment for our future webinars. This one has been the one in the series towards exploring how public finance and green finance, which are not the same, so public financing, green finance, become next frontier, and how does it link with GPP practices. Finally, what is quite important to emphasize that quite a few of the interventions have been about governance question, including through coordination of national and subnational public procurement or green or sustainable public procurement, and also through coordination across different line ministries and different sectors. So colleagues, thank you very much. We've got quite a lot of very interesting ideas for the next webinars, and certainly we hope that our exchange would contribute to very interesting building up partnership across Asia, Pacific region, and Europe. So through the conversations, we can build up our understanding of opportunities and innovations in the area of GPP, and how can it eventually contribute to the total transformation of the market relations towards more sustainable and inclusive. Thank you very much, Khun Nan. Over to you.
Yes. So thank you very much for the concluding remarks. So I think the time is already up. So thank you very much for joining us today. And please stay tuned because you have heard that we will have another webinars in the way. So please stay tuned with us and then stay in touch. And until next time, thank you very much for today. Have a lovely day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.